Tracy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Bevin.
Yay. I'm so glad you could join us. I just absolutely adore you, and I'm excited to share your wisdom with all who are in my podcast audience. Okay, so first of all, I usually like to start business in the front, but I actually, you know what? Let's start business in the front. Tell me about what you do as a psychic medium extraordinaire.
All right, so let's talk about the difference between mediumship and psychic aspect. So mediumship is the gift to see loved ones that have passed to the other side, fairies, guides, angels, etherical beings that exist in different planes than what we are on, right? So mediumship is usually something you're born with, or that you might have a life event that may cause this awareness to come on. And so that's kind of mediumship in a quick little container there, where psychic aspect is more using a medium such as tarot cards, crystal ball, palmistry, things like that. So that usually we'll use a tarot spread because that tells me a little bit about what's going on with you specifically. Where mediumship, when I open myself to the universe, I don't know who's going to come through, what they're going to say, any of that. And usually it's not life-shattering, information. They don't tell you the lottery numbers. Otherwise, I probably still wouldn't be sitting here, right? Had to learn a long time ago, can't use my gift for any personal gain. But yeah, that's kind of the two things that I do in unison with one another. And so it depends on, some people may want just specifically mediumship. Some people may want, 20 minutes of tarot cards. So yeah, it really depends on, what you want, what your intention is for the session.
Awesome. And you're the kind of psychic medium who does one-on-one client work.
Yes, I do one-on-one client work. And then as I get into my story, I can kind of tell you a little bit more about, working in front of large groups. So that's also something that I do is I will do mediumship from platform, and demonstration, which is usually, I can do anything from a small group of people, 5 to 20 to, I've been in front of probably, 100 people or more doing readings. So I do groups and then privates as well, just depending. And I also teach classes. So kind of depending on, what specifically people are looking for, I can pretty much, adjust, whatever it is they want.
Oh, I love that. So let's dig in. Tell me about growing up. Were you always different, or were you the kind of kid that fit in?
Oh no, of course. I was a weird kid. Of course. So when I was 10, I started seeing dead people, and they would come around my bed in shadow form. And I couldn't tell who they were by looking at them, but I knew who they were by their energies. It was actually my grandfather and my uncle who had started coming to me. And so at 10, I did not have parents that I could go to and say, oh my gosh, this is what's happening. I'm seeing dead people. So I just prayed, to God, please take it away. And it kind of lessened, but I was a weird kid. I was, when everyone else was doing their, scholastic book orders and ordering Holly Hobby, I'm going to date myself there. I was the one, I want, mysteries and beyond and the haunted house ones and the scary stuff. And so I was always, searching, and my mother would put me to bed at night, and I would pull the covers up over my head, and I'd have a flashlight, and I read the Bible from front to back by the time I was 12. Because I was searching. I knew there was something else. And then in the 70s, it was very acceptable to take your child, drop them at Sunday school. So my mom would take me to the Baptist church, Pentecostal church, Catholic church, Christian church, whatever it was. And I would go to Sunday school. And then she would come gather me up. So, I was always searching. And then in my early 20s, I hadn't been married for very long. I had this vision of God standing next to my husband's side of the bed. And he was, and I will say he, because that's my background, is to put the masculine on God. So he was in a white robe and just glowing from the head up, no facial features, no head or anything. So that completely sent me into a tailspin. I'm in the bathroom, I'm bawling. My husband comes in, he's like, what is going on? I'm like, I saw God on your side of the bed. Did you see him? He's like, on my side of the bed? I'm like, yep. He's like, nope, didn't see it. So after that, it was an explosion where it was just I was seeing dead people everywhere. And then they were coming to me very clearly. I may see them. I may get a feeling in my body of how they passed, and there's 3 types ways to communicate. So you've got clairaudient, which is where you hear spirit, clairvoyant, which is where you see it, and clairsentient, which is where you get a sense or a smell. So a lot of mine is clairaudient. So I will close my eyes because I have a French guide a lot of times that will like allow people to talk, and they talk really fast. So I have to like close my eyes and listen. And then also clairvoyance is the other strong part for me, which is, you know, seeing them, visualizing them. Now they don't show up like you and I in these dense bodies. They're much more etherical. And it's almost like, you know how Glinda the Good Witch in Wizard of Oz comes in her bubble, right? So it's this energy, this essence. And then the sitter, which is what we call a person who's come for a reading, may then put that vision on of what their loved one looked like, or I may as well from information that's coming through. So they're vibrating at a very high, I don't know how to explain it other than it's just a really high vibration. So a lot of times I have to try to bring them down or listen or get the feeling of, you know, what they're trying to tell me. So in my early 20s, I thought I was crazy because I was hearing, you know, and seeing all of this. And I thought, oh my gosh, nobody else hears or sees any of this. And so at the time I was doing nails, and I had a client, and she was really spiritual. So I said to her and told her, you know, this is what's going on for me. And so she said, for one, you need to put protection around you. So Saint Michael and purple. Okay. So that, you know, I learned that right away, because when we do this work, we have to protect ourselves. It's like, you know, sticking your child down in the subway with no protection, right? You can't just open yourself to the spirit world without having protection and guides and those type of things. So I saw this, you know, gal is doing her nails. I said, what do I do? She sent me to Spiritual Science Church. So spiritualism is a movement that started over in England and then came to the colonies and then moved westward. So they believe in the continuation of life, that we always exist, right? Infinity not, like there's no end and there's no beginning. Just as an energy, we will take a physical form and then we move back out of that physical form when this physical form can no longer support that. So I went to the church, met the reverend. She gave me a reading. She said, I can help you. Start coming, you know, come to church, come to trainings, right? So spiritualism, they believe in the continuation of life and energy healing. So I learned a lot about energy healing. So before you know it, I, you know, was doing healings every Sunday, moving energy, you know, a Reiki master, love energy work. And I always like to tell people, you know, like, be aware, like, of energy. How do I feel around this person? You know, you may meet somebody and in the first 5 minutes, you're like, where have you been? I've known you my whole life. And then there's other people that you're like, oh, back it up, right? So not only are we super aware of the energies that are coming towards us, also what energy am I bringing to the party? How am I showing up with my energy too? So energy is always something that I've been really extremely sensitive to. So I always like to tell people, you know, to really pay attention to, you know, energy and how that shifts. And if you go into a room and everybody's kind of down, but you know, that one sparkly person that comes in and laughs and has a good time, and how it just, you know, can change the tone and the atmosphere with just simply adjusting your energy. So when I was involved in the Spiritual Science Church for 16 years, we had mediums come from England. Now in England, very acceptable mediumship, right? So it's very strict there. You have to learn, you have to sit in circle for a year, which is what we would call seance there. They call it circle. You know, if the meeting starts at 7 o'clock, you're not to be late. The door is locked. You don't cross your legs. You don't get up and go to the bathroom. You don't get a drink, and you sit with this circle for a whole year and you train. And it's very governed over there. And so I was lucky enough to have these mediums come from England, you know, and they may rent out theaters there and have 500 people that come to see, and you have an opening, you know, a middle, you know, act and a headliner that you've come to see. So very acceptable. So that was really interesting for me, because growing up with no type of structure, nobody to say, hey, this is what's going on, to actually meet people that it was like totally normal for them. They had been raised in spiritualism. That was something that was very acceptable for them. So, you know, that's my biggest thing as my legacy moving forward, is to make sure that those women and men coming up behind me, you know that they can turn to me for education and for learning, because I think that's the biggest thing that I was lacking, was that I didn't have anyone to turn to and say, hey, is this okay? or what, what's going on, what should I do? So anyways, my friends and mentors from England have been coming out for about 25 years. In the meantime, I have also traveled to England and studied and taught, so I can say I'm properly trained. And I'm very thankful for my friends. And, there's 3 generations that I know now. I go to England, it's like I'm going home. I have these beautiful people, and I get to go to Spiritualist church, which is, really great for my soul. And the promoter that originally had brought the mediums over from England was my first promoter that, took me aside and said, hey, we're gonna push you out in front of everybody tonight, and you're gonna give readings. And I was like, right. So, I'm also very thankful for that person, which he's on the other side now, being in my life and pushing me forward. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. It's always constantly changing and growing. I never really used to have too much awareness about angels, but one time I went to do a reading for a gal, and this angel came in behind her. He was about 14 feet tall, and he had to duck his wings in to come in the door. And after that, I was like, whoa, right? Like I had never seen angels before. So then I had that awareness. So things are always changing and growing for me as well. So I'm kind of, like rolling with the changes of, and then there's people that I've been doing readings for 30 years. And so, they want different things too. So, working in more doing some somatic work and helping people to kind of move things, through their body or understand what's going on with them. So really enjoy that as well.
When you do somatic work, what kind of work are you doing with folks?
So usually it's a 3-part. So you have breath work, grounding, and then there's movement. So depending on what, I'm theming around, I do work with certain people that have had some really traumatic deaths. And so for them, sitting and talking about it works, but then also moving that through the body. And then there's integration at the end where you're, integrating and maybe doing some type of meditation, or something like that.
Oh, that's fascinating. You had also mentioned sort of working with fairies and working with like different types of energies. Do you do that type of stuff?
Fairies are pretty nasty, to be honest. They have little sharp teeth and pointed. I mean, let's take Tinkerbell for, instance. Fairies you really just don't want to mess with. But yeah, I mean, they're in my awareness. Every once in a while I have them show up, or I may have, a little spirit guide. I have one that shows up for a friend that looks like Dobby from Harry Potter. So, I've had some of these little creatures come floating in and out. And that's kind of been one of those things that has evolved for me as well. Because like I said, even the angel thing, I didn't have that awareness, and then aliens, which is a whole nother topic, of just all of these beings that are existing in these different dimensions. Because it said we're here in the 3rd dimension, but there's 7 other dimensions that are happening at the same time, as well as, the other dimensions. And so it's really interesting when you start studying and doing dimension work.
Wow. How do you start studying and doing dimension work?
Once again, I'm kind of self-taught. So, really sitting in meditation is the biggest thing. Like my son is pretty talented with cards, but he's like, Mom, I want to do mediumship. And I'm like, well, you have to sit in meditation because that's a space and place that you open, and you have to have guides, you have to open to the universe, you have to close to the universe. You can't, a lot of people I meet are very empathic, but they're walking around open all the time. So they're getting everybody's crap and they're getting everybody's emotions and energy. And if you're an empath during this time and you're not opening and closing, it's very, very hard on you because there's so much going on the earth plane, right? That we're all being flooded with constantly. So, super important to sit in meditation on a daily basis. I sit every, morning for 15 minutes. Sometimes I may sit in the evening if I get time. So, I have people that want to learn all the time, like I said, mediumship's kind of one of those things. If you have it, you have it. I can help to guide you. I can't, bestow that upon you. Now, the psychic aspect I can help you with because I believe everybody is in tune psychically. It's just someone may sit at the, at the piano and plunk out things while somebody else is a Mozart, right? So some of us just come in clicking a little bit higher, but it doesn't mean that you can't be taught to listen to your intuition and use a medium like, tea leaves, crystal ball, palmistry, astrology. anything that floats your boat. So, I always tell people, like, what are you interested in? Like, what, is calling you? Like, a lot of people that buy a tarot deck, okay, cool. So if you're interested in tarot, then now you want to study about tarot. And so, yeah, dimension work is one of those things that you have to kind of, it's almost the same as like physical mediumship. So physical mediumship is where you can kind of step out of your body and allow someone else to come in. That's not something that I do very lightly or do a lot, just because I have to have someone there that's protecting me, bringing me back to my body, these type of things. So dimension work is almost the same way, in that I am leaving my physical body and I'm traveling to another dimension, wherever that is, or wherever that dimension may take me. Yeah. And always having a strong, clear intention. What am I doing? Am I meeting, a certain God? Maybe I'm, studying an Indian God and I want to go where the blue gods are, so that's another dimension. So I ask specifically to go there. Or if I'm studying, a specific goddess like Pahavarti, then, I'm asking to go to her dimension so that I can get, information. Maybe if I am going to work with somebody that really needs some help, but a loved one is on the other side, I, will ask to go where they are. Sometimes I'm put there without even, realizing that that's where I'm going. So yeah, dimension work is tricky business. But always, if you have somebody that's there with you, that grounds you, that then takes you on that journey and then brings you back to your body, it's pretty safe. But I always recommend that people, have somebody that can sit with them, and that, you've been a little bit educated about what to expect and how to get back to your body, because shamans believe that when we start to do that work, that we can leave parts of ourselves in different dimensions. So that's a lot of times where ayahuasca and different hallucinogens will come in, and, shamans will walk you through to go through and, pick back up parts of your soul to bring in to make you whole, which, like, once again, is a whole nother really interesting subject. But
okay, so you had mentioned that for folks who are empaths and who are walking around open all the time, that they're not serving themselves. I'd love to teach on self-care for empaths, because I think so many folks are raised in a very, we'll say, psychic phobic society, while all of us have access to these gifts. It's almost like being cut off from, like, your literal sixth sense, right? Like, imagine never being taught how to taste, or people denying that you can even taste, right? So what can you teach on, like, a kind of best practice on opening and closing for folks who are, like, running around open and don't know what that even means?
Absolutely. So I teach, like, a basic meditation on this. So what I do is have you imagine yourself, imagine a flower, like whatever's the most beautiful flower that, I usually will do a red or a pink rose for myself. So when I see that and I'm closed, I imagine that those buds are tight. Right. So that means I'm closed to the universe, right? I'm not going to get anybody's stuff coming in. I can go to the grocery store without having to, have the clerk's dead mother say, tell her this, tell her that, right? Yeah. Not, sometimes they do break through if it's really super important, but I'm not walking around open all the time, just for whoever and whatever to come through. So when you want to work, let's say you're going to pick up, your tarot cards, or you're going to sit with somebody, or you're going to, pray, or, whatever that is, and you want to open yourself to the universe, then you're going to imagine that flower again, and then you're going to imagine being inside of the flower, and then you're going to open up your petals one at a time. Then you're open to the universe to receive, right? So do the work that you're going to do, whatever that is, and then when you're done, once again, close up your petals, right? So that's helpful.
That is real. I mean, that's what a beautiful visualization too.
Yeah.
To just think of your flower. Oh, that's so cool. Will you do a lot of Tantra work?
I do a smidge, yeah.
Tantra?
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned it at some point that it was like something you do as a nourishing practice for yourself. Will you talk more about just using that as a practice, what it is, and
Well, Tantra is very large. I mean, it's a type of yogic study. There's white and red. And so red is very sexual, where white is more purity. And so, we store a lot in the body. We store a lot of energy, trauma, things like that. So through Tantra, where, we learn to become one with our partners or with ourselves, and we're able to exchange in an energetic way, right? So, becoming intimate. And a lot of times, in the tantric philosophies, men are taught, how to have multiple orgasms, right? Without actually, spilling their seed, which is what they call ejaculation. And so I think that's really an interesting aspect for men, especially because, you were talking about how we're raised, and, it's not seen that that's something possible for men, and that you can have intimacy in that way, in an energetic way, and you can, move that energy up and down the spine, and share it with a partner or with yourself. And it's a great way to connect into God, right? And it's a great way to start to move your kundalini and elevate yourself, I guess. So if you're interested, I would really encourage you to, pick up a book and, study some tantric studies. But yeah, I probably do more than a smidge, but I do enjoy it a lot.
And so you've been a practicing person who trades time for mediumship for 30 years, right? Mm-hmm. And so you've probably learned a lot about what your boundaries are around business practices and how much you see clients and things like that. I'm curious if you could talk about like how you figure out what your boundaries are around your business and the time.
Well, there are two different things that I do. So mediumship, of course, is within a container, right? It's like anything else. You're making an appointment with somebody and you're sitting with them during that time. So I don't schedule anything else. I spend that time with that person, and then I'm able to come into that space and place, right? It's much more right brain for me compared to doing contracts and things that I do in my left brain work. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it used to be a little bit harder for me to kind of slip back and forth because it's like using two sides of the brain. But I think that I've kind of trained myself, to be able to just, and then having a space specifically for that. So I have a space specifically in my home that I know when I'm in that space, that's where I'm at. I'm doing spiritual work, compared to having my office upstairs, where that's where I sit and do, my more left brain work.
I love that. And that's so having specific space in your home that's like, because you don't only do psychic medium work for money, so you have like that duality. I ask specifically because I have a lot of folks who listen to the podcast who do psychic medium work, and I see them like kind of revising how many clients they'll see in a week and like that kind of thing. It's just as they learn more about their capacity in their bodies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it doesn't deplete me. I know some people will say, oh, I'm so depleted after I do a reading. For me, it jazzes me, right? Because I'm connecting with another human being in an intimate way. And, intimacy happens on a lot of different levels, right? It's not just a physical intimacy. It can be an energetic, or just being with somebody and listening to somebody. And so, being able to help someone, especially those people that are in extreme pain because a loved one has passed away, a child or a parent or, a partner, it's very rewarding in that way. Yeah. But I have learned, over 30 years to, make time for it and make it, valuable for not only myself, but the person that I'm, spending time with. So I will, it just depends on my week. I may, take 2 days that I'm like, okay, I'm going to take the afternoon to do this, and I'm going to do so many readings or whatever. And then I can, switch back and do, my, my left brain job. So yeah, I've had to learn the hard way. It hasn't always been easy. I mean, there's been times when I sometimes clients will drain you, just kind of depends, and they don't do it meaningfully. Just sometimes, there's some heavy stuff. People, a lot of times, work in a lot of heavy stuff. So yeah, I'm just thankful. I used to think it was a curse, but I learned that it's not. It's a blessing to be able to do this and to be able to share with people and really do something that's meaningful, that's helpful, that, you know, I'm in the grand scheme of things, I'm helping people to heal and to move forward. And, you know, to really just know that, you know, your loved ones are there. They hear you, you know, they can help guide you from the other side. They can't interfere. But, you know, that's another thing is generational work, you know, ancestor work. How important is that? You know, it's said that there's 7 generations back. You know, we carry the fears and the hopes and the dreams and, you know, all those things. If I'm afraid of spiders, why is that? Maybe my mother was afraid of spiders and her mother before her and her mother before her, right? That's a really simplistic, you know, idea behind it. But ancestor work for me is super important. And the older I get, I realize like how important ancestor work really is, because I look at who I am and why I am, right? Who I am, because of those women that went before me. My grandmother was very intuitive. She would have visions, although I could never get her to talk about it. Even towards the end of her life, I'd, Grandma, you know, tell me. And she was like, oh, no, you know, she didn't talk about that. Now, my mother, none of that. She doesn't, you know, have any interest or any type of ability that I know of. And then my daughter, she was always much more interested in helping do like the producing part of things, or putting, you know, if I'm doing some type of event or something, she's very helpful with that. But as far as, you know, doing mediumship or psychic work, that's never been her gig. So I was kind of giggle. I'm like, maybe it skips a generation. I don't know. But yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you have been married for a super long time. Mm-hmm. What are your sort of tips or ideas for what keeps a marriage long lasting and harmonious?
Okay. So I think the biggest thing is to realize that you're not mind readers, right? So if I need something from my husband, I need to communicate that, right? I need to say what I need to say. And the same with him. If there's something specific, to communicate with one another. And to realize he's not going to know, you know, you and I as a woman, if we go shopping and I say, I like that purse, in your mind, you register that. You're like, okay, next birthday, Christmas, anniversary, she's getting that purse, right? Men don't register that, right? They're like, you know, how many years did I wait for the purse on my birthday? And I'm like, I told you, you know, I basically said, right? So realizing, so we have this code word now. It's like, okay, write it down, right? So he knows if I say write it down, he's like, oh, she wants that, right? So I've learned, you know, and it hasn't always been easy. I mean, my husband and I have done a lot of self-work. We've done, you know, we studied with Tony Robbins for probably 20 years. We've done tantric work. We went to different festivals and Burning Man. And, you know, I usually always take my husband kicking and screaming, but he has the best time. And, you know, we learn and grow from that. And I think it's super important to have those things that you do that fill your cup, right? So, you know, go do what you love. And he goes and does what he loves. And then you come back together and your cup is full. And then also you have those activities that you do together. You know, my husband and I are together all day, every day. And we always have had our own businesses. So we're very used to that, you know, and just learning that men are different from women. Men don't need 3,000 words a day. Women do, right? We need to talk. Men don't. They have 800 to 900 and they're good, right? They're like, let me solve this for you. And so, you know, a lot of times as women, we're like, you know, we don't want you to solve it. We just want you to, you know, give us a hug and tell us everything is going to be okay, right? And hold space. So I think, you know, nourishing yourself in that way, and, you know, make dates with one another. You know, our children are grown now, but, you know, when they were smaller, we would go on a date and we would allow ourselves to talk about the kids for 15 minutes. And then after that, we didn't talk about the kids, right? It was about us. So even now being married, and even though we spend all day together, it's still, you know, we're usually working in that space. So we'll, you know, make time for one another to date, or, you know, to have intimate time together, and to plan that. You know, it's like, plan intimacy, make a time, you know, like tonight's going to happen at 8 o'clock, or, you know, whatever that is, because as silly as it sounds to schedule time to be with one another, it's super important, because otherwise, you know, that doesn't happen. I think as we've become empty nesters, you know, of course we have more time and ability to, you know, do those things. So yeah, I think those are my biggest tips, is just learn and grow together, and, you know, realize that you can't read each other's minds. Oh, and the other big thing, took me about 17 years of marriage to figure this out. You are never going to see it their way. and they are never going to see it your way. I don't care if you talk till you're blue in the face, they will not see it your way. So guess what? You have to find a happy medium, right? Where is your happy medium? Where can both of you exist in that space of agreement, you know? And sometimes we just agree to disagree on things. So.
Yeah, that's how I deal with my mom. Frequently, we just stop and agree to disagree, and it's fine. That's like, we don't have to actually find consensus on everything.
Right, it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah. What advice would you give to your 21-year-old self?
Everything's going to be okay. Yeah, everything's just going to be fine, right? We worry about everything. We have this, you know, we come from this cultural and society of like, you know, constantly worrying. Like I worry, you know, worrying about the past. There's nothing we can do about the past. The past has already happened. We learn, we grow from it, we move on. We all have light and dark, right? The yin and the yang. And we, you know, we all have shadow and we all have light. And there's important things that happen in the dark, right? There's, you know, lots of things happen in the dark, you know, and in the darkness of winter and things like that. So, you know, there's learning and growing and resting and things that happen, right? We go to bed at night to rest. So lots happen in the dark. So also in the light, right? It's like the shiny aspect of you. I always used to think, oh, I have to be Pollyanna and I have to be happy and shiny all the time, you know, but that's not true. I'm not always living in the white light. I do have darkness. I do have shadows. And sometimes, you know, things come up that I have to look at within myself, you know, or things are mirrored back at me. And so, you know, or things from the past that come up that I wish I would have done differently, but, you know, I can't. So, you know, there's no sense in worrying about the past or fretting over that, or even worrying about the future, right? Because we can't control that either. Really, the only thing we can control is how we react to a situation. That's the only control that we have. So, you know, I always just encourage people, be present in the moment. Like the moment you and I are having right now, this moment will never happen again. So how can I be present in that moment, right? And it's like every person and thing that comes into your life will one day leave your life. I had a meditation teacher teach me that years ago, and it's been huge, right? So that I can concentrate and really be with those humans or whatever the situation is and be in that moment and be present for them, because that's really the only thing you have is the present moment. That's why it's a gift and we call it the present.
Yes. Oh my God, that's so good. That's great advice. Do you have any advice for grieving and walking through the process of grief?
Sure. Grieving is never easy. I don't care who you are. I had someone tell me once, oh, you're a medium. Isn't it a lot easier for you? Heck no, it's not easier for me. You know, I still miss that person being in their physical, you know, humanness too. And I think that talking about loved ones, right? Like this is the biggest thing when I sit with mothers that have lost their children. My child existed, say their name. I mean, I've been in a situation, I don't know if any of you have or your viewers have, where you know, meet somebody in town and, you know, they've had a loved one that's passed and you don't know what to say. You know, should I say, you know, something about the loved one? Maybe it's too sensitive. They don't want me to talk about it. But, you know, everyone I sit with, it's like they want their loved one, you know, talked about, because you know, how do we remember them? How do we honor, right? How do we never move on. We move forward, right? We can never move on from a death, right? Like, you know, we lose a loved one and they're always in our heart and we can honor them by packing love around that, but we always save that sacred space, right? And my biggest thing is and this is something that's come to light with me a lot lately, is to be able to educate around grief and the things that we say to people that are, you know, experiencing grief. Like I used to, you know, say, I'm sorry all the time, right? Well, that's not what people want to hear. They don't want to hear, I'm sorry. It's, you know, it's empty. So, you know, I always just try to talk about their loved one and, you know, pray or, you know, whatever, you know, send them healing and love and, you know, that type of thing. And to, I hear you got to be strong all the time, right? You got to be strong. You got to be strong. You got to push along. You got to be strong for that loved one. And I think it's super important to let people know you don't have to be strong, right? You can ask people around you that love you to be strong for you, right? And so that's kind of when you're dealing with somebody that's, you know, going through grief, and it's to really honor their tears and honor, you know, if they're pissed off about whatever it is, just honor that and be with it. You know, like how many times are we just honored for our feelings? Like, you know, you have every right to feel that way. You go ahead and cry, you go ahead and be pissed, you know, whatever that is, to honor them in that space and to meet them there and to hold space. I mean, most of the time you don't have to say anything. Like I remember when my grandmother's boyfriend died and they had shared a room, and I went to see her afterwards and she said, Casey, is he really gone? And I said, yeah, Grandma, he's gone. And that was all we said. And I sat with her for probably an hour. And I think that was a big lesson for me, was that holding space for people, super important, right? For whatever comes up, just a container. And so, and looking at that with dealing with someone who's in a grief space, right? But what about when it's you that's in the grief space, right? Is to give yourself grace, realize, right, that you're going to have days, you're going to have time that you don't want to get out of bed, and that's okay. And maybe you don't want to, deal with life that day, and that's okay too. And so realizing that, and there's no way around it. You can drink, you can smoke, you can, shop, you can, whatever that is that you think you can do to numb shit, but it doesn't work, right? The only way to get through grief is to go through it. There's no way around it, above it, or over it, right? There's just time. And, we come to, hopefully an acceptance space. I remember I had lost my stepfather and my father in a 5-month period, and I was extremely close. I was a very lucky woman to have 2 men love me the way they both did. Makes me teary-eyed talking about it, but I was a mess, and for probably a year. And I'm always very aware of what I eat and do my yoga practice and all of those things. And I just gave it all up. I didn't care. I probably gained 25, 30 pounds. I didn't go to yoga. I didn't do any of that. But, I look back now and I had to give myself the grace and to realize that you are mourning, right? So I think that's the biggest thing, is we don't give ourselves grace to realize that it's okay. It's okay to be sad that that person is gone. It's okay to be pissed. It's okay to go sit at the cemetery all day long. It's okay not to go sit at the cemetery all day long, right? Because we don't all grieve the same either. I'm the type of person, I have to see someone when they pass away. Like I don't like a closed casket or not being able to see somebody, but that's not my choice if that's what they've chosen. But for me, that's closure, right? I was the weird kid, you're talking, did you fit in as a teenager? Well, in my senior year of high school, instead of going to, senior ditch days to the lake or whatever, I'd go to the cemetery, where I would, walk through the, mausoleums and through the grounds. And I still love cemeteries for that reason. So, just realizing attunement, to where you're at and how you're feeling, and totally just being with that. I mean, it's very painful at times, and sometimes we measure. I can remember after, my stepfather had died, I was like, okay, I've went an hour without crying. I've went half a day without crying. I've went the full day okay, now I've been a week without crying, or, whatever that is. And allowing myself the awareness that, I wasn't crying, that I was feeling better. And then there'd be days when I was a hot mess, right? Which there's nothing wrong with that either. So, I think in wrapping all of that up, it's really basically just acceptance and surrender to where you're at, and knowing that that's okay, and that everybody grieves differently. Like, if for me, it's, I want to see that person, after they've passed. I want to go to the cemetery and I want to, lay flowers, where some people are like, no, I can't see any of that. I'm never going back to the cemetery, any of that. And that's perfectly fine too, because everybody grieves, differently. So supporting yourself and supporting others that are in that space, I think is the most important thing, whether that's through sitting with them or not saying anything, or, just, I love you and I'm here for you. What do you need,
Oh, those are very actionable and super helpful tips for grieving. I love that. Casey, how can folks connect with you for a reading?
So they can reach me on my page, which is Casey, Psychic, Medium, and Yogi Extraordinaire. So I think Bevin has a link or something.
It's a Facebook page.
Oh, it's a Facebook page. Okay, I'm not very technical, as you can tell.
It's all right. It's right. Just so that people know, you're going through Facebook, and then you're going to clicky call now. It's right at the top of the page.
Or message me.
Or message me, something like that. It's an action. There's an action bubble, and you can take that action and you can connect with Casey. Casey, you see clients in person and also online, right?
On Zoom. Mm-hmm.
Zoom. Great. And in-person people would find you in Northern California?
Northern California, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Casey. I really appreciate you being here, sharing your gifts, sharing your story, and sharing all these very actionable tips with everybody in the podcast land.
Oh, thank you, Bevin, for having me.
Yay. Bye, Casey.
Bye.